The lawyer's letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. 62 years old, and I still remembered the exact weight of hope, how it felt in my chest the day Margaret finally came home from the hospital, cancer-free. That was 18 months ago. This letter would tell me if I'd ever see my grandchildren again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really began. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I spent 35 years building custom furniture in Portland, Maine. Not the fancy stuff you see in magazines, real furniture. Dining tables that families would gather around for generations. Rocking chairs that would soothe crying babies and comfort grieving widows. I learned the trade from my father, who learned it from his, and I always thought I'd pass it to my son, James. Margaret and I met in 1985 at a church social. She was wearing a yellow sundress and laughing at something her sister said. I was 32, she was 28, and neither of us believed in love at first sight until that moment. We were married 6 months later in the same church. Our son James came along 2 years after that, and our daughter Emily 3 years after him. Life was simple, good simple. I'd wake at 5, make coffee, kiss Margaret goodbye while she was still half asleep, and be at my workshop by 6. My crew, Bobby, Frank, and Miguel. They weren't just employees. Bobby had been with me for 20 years, Frank for 15, Miguel for 12. We'd built hundreds of pieces together. They knew when to joke and when to work in silence, when I needed coffee and when I needed space. Margaret worked as a school librarian. She'd come home with stories about the kids, about the books they loved, about the ones who struggled and needed extra help. She was patient in a way I never quite managed. Where I'd get frustrated with a piece of wood that wouldn't cooperate, she'd spend hours with a child who couldn't read, never once raising her voice. James grew up steady and reliable. Became a high school history teacher, married a wonderful woman named Patricia. They gave us 2 grandchildren, Sophie, who's 9 now, and little Daniel, who just turned 6. Emily went into nursing, never married, but she was happy. Said she had enough family to take care of at work. Everything changed on a Tuesday in March, 2 years ago. Margaret came home from her checkup pale. She sat at the kitchen table, the first one I'd ever built, oak with maple inlays, and told me the doctor found something. Ovarian cancer, stage 3. I won't pretend I was strong in that moment. I sat across from her and cried. 60 years old, and I cried like a child. But then Margaret reached across that table, took my hand and said, "Thomas, we've weathered worse." Though I couldn't remember when. The next 6 months were hell. Chemotherapy every 3 weeks. I'd close the workshop early on treatment days, drive her to the hospital, hold her hand while the poison dripped into her veins. We called it poison because that's what it was. Poison meant to kill the cancer faster than it killed her. She lost her hair, lost 40 pounds. There were nights she couldn't keep anything down, mornings she was too weak to stand. I'd carry her to the bathroom, wash her face, brush her teeth. The woman who'd been my rock for 37 years couldn't lift her own head some days. Bobby, Frank, and Miguel never complained when I had to leave early or come in late. They picked up the slack, finished orders on time, even worked weekends without asking for overtime. "Boss," Bobby told me one Friday, "family comes first. Always has, always will. The furniture can wait." James visited twice a week with Patricia and the kids. Emily came by almost every day after her shifts. They'd bring meals, do laundry, sit with Margaret so I could catch a few hours of sleep. My sister Dorothy flew in from Arizona and stayed for 2 months. My brother Paul drove up from Boston every weekend. The bills started piling up fast. Insurance covered most of it, but most isn't all. There were co-pays and deductibles and experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't touch. I mortgaged the workshop, took out loans, sold my truck, and bought a 20-year-old Honda. Margaret would apologize. Can you imagine? Dying woman apologizing for the cost of trying to live. I'd kiss her forehead and tell her we'd figure it out. And we did. Barely. But we did. Then, in September, her oncologist said 5 words I'll never forget. "The scans are coming back clear. Not cured. Cancer is never cured. Just in remission. But clear. No visible tumors. No active cancer cells. Clear." Margaret cried. I cried. James and Emily cried. We all stood in that hospital room and cried like fools. The doctor smiled and said she'd need regular checkups, but for now, she could go home and rest. The next 2 months were recovery. Margaret slowly gained weight back. Her hair started growing in gray and curly, where it used to be straight and brown. She had more energy, started going for walks, even returned to the library part-time. I'd catch her sometimes, standing at the kitchen window watching birds at the feeder, and I'd think about how close we came to losing all this, how every ordinary moment was a gift we almost didn't get. Then came December. Margaret sat me down on a Sunday evening. The kids were supposed to come for dinner, but she told them not to. That should have been my first warning. "Thomas," she said, "I need to talk to you about something." "Of course," I said. "What is it?" She looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Cold. Distant. "I want a divorce." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because it had to be a joke. "What?" "I've been thinking about this for weeks. Going through cancer, facing death. It made me realize something. Life is short, Thomas. Too short to spend it unfulfilled." "Unfulfilled?" The word stuck in my throat. "Margaret, what are you talking about?" "You're a good man," she said, and there was pity in her voice that made me nauseous. "You took care of me. You were there. But that's all you were, there. I need more than that." "More than what?" "I gave you everything. You gave me obligation, duty. I need passion, Thomas. I need to feel alive." I stood up, sat back down, stood up again. "This is the cancer talking, the medication. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years." She pulled out papers from her purse, divorce papers, already filled out, just needing signatures. "I've spoken to a lawyer. I'm asking for 50% of all marital assets, including your share of the workshop. And I want primary custody of visitation rights for Sophie and Daniel." "Custody? They're not our children. They're our grandchildren. James has custody. James is my son. He'll side with me. And Patricia will follow his lead." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. "This is insane. Margaret, please. Whatever I did wrong, I'll fix it. We'll go to counseling. "I don't want to fix anything," she interrupted. "I want out. I want to actually live before I die." She left that night, stayed with her sister in Portsmouth. I sat in our house, the house we'd lived in for 33 years, and tried to understand what happened. The next morning, James called. "Dad, Mom told me everything." "James, she's not well. The cancer, the treatment, it's—" "Stop," he said, and his voice was ice. "You know what Mom told me? She told me how you treated her like a burden, how you resented taking care of her, how you made her feel guilty for being sick. That's not true. Not any of it. She has medical bills, Dad. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. You think she doesn't know what that did to your precious workshop? You think she can't see the resentment every time you look at her? I never resented her. James, I love your mother. You love the idea of her. You love having someone to take care of so you can feel like a hero. But you never actually saw her. Never asked what she needed." He hung up. Emily called an hour later, saying almost the same things. When I tried to see Sophie and Daniel, Patricia answered the door and told me James didn't want me around the kids right now. "Patricia, please. This is crazy." "Is it?" she asked. "Maybe you need to think about why your wife of 37 years would rather leave than stay." The door closed. I stood on the porch of my son's house and realized I'd lost everything. The divorce moved fast. Margaret's lawyer was sharp and mean. My lawyer was overworked and underpaid, the only one I could afford. The workshop got divided. Bobby, Frank, and Miguel tried to stay neutral, but I could see it hurt them. We'd been a family, and now we were a business getting split down the middle. I ended up with the building but had to buy out Margaret's share of the equipment. More loans, more debt. I was working 16-hour days just to keep the lights on. James wouldn't speak to me. Emily sent terse text messages but refused to visit. I'd see photos of Sophie and Daniel on social media, birthday parties, soccer games, school plays, and I wasn't in any of them. 6 months after Margaret left, I was sitting in my workshop at midnight, too tired to drive home, when Bobby walked in. "Boss, you're going to kill yourself working like this." "Maybe that's the point." He pulled up a stool. "You know that's not true." "I don't know anything anymore, Bobby. My wife left me. My kids hate me. I haven't seen my grandchildren in 6 months. What's the point of any of this?" Bobby was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You remember when my daughter had leukemia, 10 years ago?" I nodded. Bobby had almost lost everything during Sarah's treatment. "You remember what you did? I gave you time off, flexible hours. You gave me more than that. You paid my full salary for 8 months while I barely worked. You took out a loan to help with her medical bills. You visited Sarah in the hospital more than my own brother did. She was sick. What else was I supposed to do?" "Exactly," Bobby said. "What else were you supposed to do?" "Boss, I know you. I've worked with you for 20 years. There's no way you resented Margaret. No way you treated her like a burden. Something else is going on." "Like what?" "I don't know. But I know you. And this doesn't add up." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe someone. 2 weeks later, Miguel came to me with something strange. "Boss, I was at the hardware store yesterday. Ran into Patricia's sister, Monica. She didn't know we worked together." "Okay?" "She was talking to someone about Margaret. Said something about how Margaret's doing so well with her new business venture. How the settlement money was exactly what she needed to get started." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What business venture?" Miguel shrugged. "I don't know. But it seemed weird. Margaret just got over cancer. Why would she be starting a business?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the timeline. About how Margaret had changed so quickly after being declared cancer-free. About how she had divorce papers ready. About how James and Emily turned on me with stories I knew weren't true. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Portsmouth where Margaret was living with her sister, parked across the street, waited. At 10 a.m., Margaret came out. She looked healthy, vibrant, nothing like the frail woman I'd taken care of months before. She got in a car with a man I didn't recognize. They drove to a cafe downtown. I followed them inside, sat at a table where I could see them, but they couldn't see me. The man was maybe 50, well-dressed. They sat close, talked intimately. At one point, he took her hand and kissed it. Margaret laughed. It was the same laugh I'd fallen in love with 40 years ago. When they left, I followed them to an office building. The sign out front said Coastal Property Development. They went inside together. I sat in my car feeling sick. Was this why she left? Another man? But something still didn't add up. The timing was too perfect. The way James and Emily had turned so quickly. The stories about me that I knew weren't true. That night, I called my brother Paul. He'd always been the smart one in the family. "Paul, I need your help. Something's wrong and I can't figure out what." I told him everything. About the divorce, about the kids, about what Miguel had heard, about Margaret and the man at the cafe. Paul was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Tommy, do you have access to Margaret's medical records?" "No." "Why?" "Because I'm remembering something." "You remember my friend Richard, the one who's an oncologist in Boston?" "Vaguely. We had lunch last month. He was complaining about insurance fraud. Said there's been an uptick in people faking cancer diagnoses to collect insurance payouts and sympathy." My blood went cold. "You think Margaret faked having cancer?" "I think you need to find out for sure. Because if she did, that explains everything. The quick turnaround. The immediate divorce. Turning the kids against you so you'd look like the bad guy. Taking half your assets. Tommy, if she faked being sick, she committed fraud. Massive fraud." I hung up and stared at the wall. It wasn't possible. I'd been there. I'd seen her suffer. The chemo, the weight loss, the weakness. Or had I? I started thinking back. Really thinking. Margaret had always gone to her appointments alone. Said she didn't want me to miss work. I'd driven her to treatments, but I'd waited in the lobby. Hospital policy, she'd said, with COVID restrictions. I'd never actually seen her get chemotherapy, never spoke directly with her oncologist. All her paperwork, all her medical information, she'd handled it all. Could someone fake cancer that convincingly? The next morning, I went to see Dorothy, my sister. She'd stayed with us during Margaret's treatment. Dorothy, I need to ask you something. When you were staying with us, when Margaret was sick, did you ever see her actually take her medication? Dorothy looked confused. She'd take it in the bathroom. Why? Did you ever see the bottles? The pills? Thomas, what's this about? Please, just think. Did you ever actually see proof she was taking cancer medication? Dorothy's face changed. Now that you mention it. No. She was very private about it. Said she didn't want to be reminded of being sick when she wasn't actively dealing with it. Thomas, what are you thinking? I drove to the hospital where Margaret had supposedly been treated. Asked to speak with her oncologist, Dr. Harrison Chen. The receptionist checked her computer. I'm sorry, sir. We don't have a Dr. Harrison Chen on staff. But my wife was treated here. Margaret Brennan. Ovarian cancer. More typing. I'm not showing any patient by that name in oncology. That's impossible. She was here for months. Chemotherapy every 3 weeks. Sir, I've worked here for 8 years. We've never had a Dr. Chen in any department, and I'm not finding your wife in our system. Are you sure she was treated at this facility? I left the hospital shaking. Drove straight to the insurance company. Asked to see the claims for Margaret's cancer treatment. The claims representative pulled up the records. I'm showing claims submitted for Margaret Brennan's cancer treatment. The total approved amount was $287,000. Can I see the details? She turned the screen toward me. Every claim was there. Chemotherapy sessions, lab work, consultations, all submitted by Dr. D.A. Harrison Chen at Portland General Hospital. These claims were paid? Yes, sir. Directly to Dr. Chen's practice as requested. Can I have contact information for his practice? She gave me an address. I drove there immediately. It was a UPS store, a mailbox rental service. Dr. Harrison Chen didn't exist. Margaret hadn't been treated at Portland General. The insurance money, nearly $300,000, had been paid to a fake doctor at a fake address. My wife had faked having cancer. I sat in my car outside that UPS store and thought about everything, the sleepless nights, the fear, watching her suffer, selling my truck, mortgaging the workshop, losing my relationship with my children because she'd convinced them I resented her illness. She'd stolen 6 months of my life, stolen $300,000 from the insurance company, stolen half my assets in the divorce, and turned my own children against me. I should have been angry. I was angry. But mostly I just felt hollow. I drove to the police station and told them everything. Showed them the records, the fake doctor, the mailbox address. They took my statement and said they'd investigate. 3 days later, 2 detectives came to my workshop. Mr. Brennan, we've completed our preliminary investigation. You were right. Your wife staged her entire cancer diagnosis. She had an accomplice, the man she's currently living with, Rick Hartley. He's a former medical billing clerk who knew how to submit fraudulent insurance claims. They've been planning this for at least 2 years. 2 years? We found emails going back that far. They met at a real estate investment seminar. Started an affair. Decided to fund their business venture through insurance fraud. The cancer scheme let them collect the insurance money, position you as the bad guy so she could get a favorable divorce settlement, and alienate your children so they'd side with her. What happens now? We've arrested both of them. They're being charged with insurance fraud, which is a federal crime. Your children have been notified. And Mr. Brennan? Your wife also forged medical records, which is a separate crime. She's looking at serious prison time. After the detectives left, I sat in my workshop and waited to feel something. Relief, vindication, anger, anything. But I just felt tired. That evening, there was a knock on my workshop door. I opened it to find James standing there. His eyes were red. Dad. James. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked to the middle of the workshop, looked around at the half-finished pieces, the tools, the sawdust covering everything. The police came to my house today. They told me everything. Dad, His voice broke. I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to say. She told us you were cruel to her, that you made her feel like a burden, that you complained about the cost of her treatment. We believed her because, why wouldn't we? She was our mother. She had cancer. He wiped his eyes. She never had cancer. No. And I said horrible things to you. I kept your grandchildren from you. Dad, I don't know how to. Stop, I said quietly. James, stop. But I need to apologize. I need to. You were lied to. By your own mother. She manipulated all of us. What happened isn't your fault. I should have known. I should have questioned it. You're my father. I've known you my whole life. I should have trusted you. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. You trusted your mother. That's not wrong, James. That's being a good son. He broke down then, full sobbing. I held him the way I used to when he was little and had nightmares. My 40-year-old son, crying in my arms. Emily came by the next day, then Patricia with Sophie and Daniel. The kids didn't understand everything, but they ran to me like no time had passed. Sophie showed me her missing tooth. Daniel told me about his t-ball team. Normal. Everything was suddenly, impossibly normal. The legal aftermath took months. Margaret and Rick Hartley were both convicted. She got 6 years in federal prison. He got 8. The insurance company recovered most of their money from assets Margaret had hidden. I got back some of what I'd lost in the divorce, though not all of it. But here's the thing about losing everything. You learn what actually matters. I didn't care about the money. I didn't even care about the workshop, though Bobby, Frank, and Miguel kept it running beautifully while I dealt with everything else. What mattered was James stopping by on Sundays with his family. Emily calling every morning just to talk. Sophie and Daniel spending weekends at my house, helping me build a tree house in the backyard. Paul flew up from Boston just to take me fishing. Dorothy came back for a month. Bobby, Frank, and Miguel threw me a welcome back party at the workshop even though I'd never really left. 6 months after Margaret's arrest, I was finishing a rocking chair, cherry wood with walnut accents, when Bobby came in. Boss, you got a minute? Always. I've been thinking about what you went through, how close you came to losing everything that actually mattered, and I realized something. What's that? You didn't lose it. That's the thing. Your kids, your grandkids, your family, they all came back, because the foundation was always solid. Margaret's lies couldn't destroy 37 years of being a good father and a good man. I thought about that. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Boss, you weathered the worst thing that could happen, being betrayed by someone you loved and turned against by your own children, and you came out the other side. That's not luck. That's character. I didn't feel particularly characterized. Mostly I felt like someone who'd been sucker punched and was still trying to catch his breath. But Bobby was right about one thing. The foundation held. Last weekend I took Sophie and Daniel to the workshop, showed them how to sand wood properly, how to feel for the grain, how to apply finish. Sophie was meticulous, patient. Daniel got bored after 5 minutes and wanted to play with the sawdust. Grandpa, Sophie said, are you sad about Grandma? I thought about how to answer that. I'm sad about what she did, but I'm happy about everything else. Like what? Like you, and Daniel, and your dad, and my workshop, and Bobby and Frank and Miguel. I have a lot to be happy about. She considered this seriously. Mom says Grandma made really bad choices. She did. But you made good choices? I tried to. I think you did good, Grandpa. Coming from a 9-year-old, that meant everything. I'm 62 now. The workshop is paid off. Bobby's talking about retirement, but I don't believe him. Frank's son just started working with us. Miguel's teaching him the trade. James and I have breakfast every Saturday morning. Emily's engaged to a kind man who makes her laugh. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found out the truth. If Margaret had gotten away with it. If I'd lived the rest of my life thinking my children hated me for being the man I actually was. But I did find out, and they don't hate me. And I'm still here building furniture that will outlast me. Margaret gets out in 4 years. I won't be there. James says he might visit once, to get closure. Emily says she never wants to see her again. That's their choice to make. As for me, I'm exactly where I need to be. In my workshop, surrounded by wood and tools and the family I built, not just the one I was born with. That lawyer's letter I mentioned at the start? It came from James's attorney. He was officially giving me shared custody rights for Sophie and Daniel. Said he wanted to make sure I had legal standing to be in their lives, no matter what. Like I needed a legal document for that. But I appreciated the gesture. Last night, I was working late on a dining table for a young couple. Their first real table, they'd said, the kind they'd pass down to their kids someday. I was applying the final coat of finish when Bobby came in. "Still at it, boss?" "Almost done." He looked at the table. "Beautiful work. You can see the love in every joint." "That's what the job is," I said. "Building things that last, things that matter." "You talking about the table or your life?" I smiled. "Maybe both." Bobby nodded. "Same thing, really. You measure twice, cut once, and build something that won't fall apart when times get hard. That's furniture. That's family. That's everything." He was right. After everything, the lies, the betrayal, the loss, the anger, what remained was the same thing that was there at the start. The things I built with my own hands, the relationships I nurtured, the trust I earned through decades of showing up and doing right. Margaret tried to tear that down. She almost succeeded, but almost doesn't count for much in the end. I'm Thomas Brennan. I'm 62 years old. I build furniture that lasts. I have a son and daughter who love me, 2 grandchildren who think I hung the moon, a crew of guys who've had my back for decades, a brother and sister who'd drop everything to help me. I lost my wife. I lost my savings. I almost lost my business. But I never lost what actually mattered. And that, I'm learning, is what it means to survive betrayal, not by being stronger than the pain, not by getting revenge or even justice, though those came. You survive by looking around and realizing that beneath all the chaos and hurt, the foundation you built over a lifetime is still there, solid, unshakable. You survive by going back to work, by showing up for Sunday dinner, by teaching your granddaughter to sand wood and your grandson to measure twice, by having breakfast with your son and calling your daughter every morning. You survive by building, always building, tables and chairs and relationships and trust, one careful, measured, loving piece at a time. That's my story, not the one I thought I'd be telling at 62, but it's mine, and I'm still here to tell it. And tomorrow morning, I'll wake up at 5, make coffee, and go to my workshop, because that's what I do. That's who I am. And nobody, not Margaret, not Rick Hartley, not anyone, can take that away.